Hello YouTube, it's Lion here with Hobbies and Man once again, and today we're doing another episode of What Talk, where we talk about the episodes of the Wheel of Time TV show. And today we're going to be looking at episode 2, Shadow's Waiting, which is a really interesting chapter in this series, a really interesting episode in this series. And I'm not going to, I'm trying not to hit on every single little point, but I do have some general ideas and some general questions, and I'm going to talk about some of the differences between the show and the books and see how I like them or how I don't like them. That's really more of the emphasis here. It's more of a breakdown / discussion than it is a review of the kind of chapters. So let's get into it. Let's start with the recap here. So the episode starts with a recap like segment, and one of the things that I noticed in the recap section, that I didn't notice the first time I watched the episode was that Moraine talks about there being a rumor of 4 tavern in the Two Rivers. Now, I don't exactly know how this came to be. How did she hear a rumor? And I think that this might have been a plot point in the book as well, or something that she says before in the books as well, but I don't remember, and it doesn't really make sense to me, because if these people have never left the Two Rivers, and the Two Rivers continues to work the same way it has, there's no way for them to tell that the tavern that exists there, right? Like, how does this come to be? Do they sense the wheel and the pattern shifting around them due to them being Aes Sedai or something? I don't really understand this, and I don't think it ever was an important thing in the books. There was a segment in the books where Moraine and Lan and Nynaeve could track Mat and Rand because they were changing things as they went around. Like, things would happen randomly across different towns, but that's not the same as what Moraine is saying here. When the boys were traveling across different towns, they were innately affecting the town by showing up. If they were at the Two Rivers their whole life and never went anywhere else, there would be no reason for Aes Sedai to notice them, right? Because no one talks about the Two Rivers. It's just a random ass little town in the buttfuck town, area of nowhere that just has tobacco, and that's it, right? So I don't really understand how she can hear rumors of tavern. So if someone knows, please let me know down in the comments, because it doesn't really work the same way that I understood it to work in the books. So yeah, let me know down in the comments. Anyways, so introduction of the White Cloaks here is pretty interesting. It's we meet it in a questioner. I thought they were interrogators, but whatever, like the Inquisition people. And this guy's an asshole. He's a horrible person. He's super shitty, but he's very intimidating. I thought that was really interesting. And the Children of the Light, I think that's what they're called, the White Cloaks, are played up a lot worse than they are in the first 3 books, which I think is pretty interesting. And it kind of shows a very kind of militant force that is against Aes Sedai, that are not necessarily bad guys. And I think that's interesting. And I think this characterization is supposed to make them more of a threat and a lot more kind of easily hateable than they were in the books. Because in the books, they were, like, at least to me, they were always bad. They were always shitty. But it wasn't because they were, like, bad people necessarily. It's because they were, like, really intransigent, like, adults that didn't listen to Egwene and Perrin most of the time when they were trying to tell them, general information. They would, like, make their own conclusions beforehand and then use anything that was said in order to enhance those conclusions instead of actually listen and figure out what the actual problem is. And I really dislike that. I don't know, I think I have a problem with authority or something. And this is kind of different from that. These are just, like, haters, like, really shitty, like, horrible people in power that are just taking advantage of it. And I also found it interesting that there's kind of this dissidence between the two big guys that were in charge. Like the silver guy, the guy with the silver, sun thing, Pauldron. He was the mostly the bad guy. He's the intimidating one that we get to know. But then the guy with the golden pauldron is kind of different. He has a different vibe to him. So pretty interesting. Now we get to the opening, which I think is really beautiful. It does kind of feel reminiscent of Game of Thrones, but it is so Wheel of Time-esque. It's a bunch of weaves happening together, a bunch of string being woven into this tapestry, this carpet, this, pattern that I think is really, really beautiful. I really like that it focuses on the Aes Sedai. I think it's pretty interesting. And it's kind of funny that, Rand, essentially the main character, is like the 5th person that is shown, like after Moraine, Lan, Egwene, and then someone else, and then I think it's Rand after that. I think that's pretty funny. Like, he's just like so unknown, such a new kind of actor. I think his name is Joshua Stransky or something like that. That he doesn't get the lead role thing, which I thought was pretty funny. I'm sure that's going to change as, you know, the series progresses and he becomes much more popular. But I just thought it was funny. But overall, the opening is very pretty. Now, the first kind of major scene here is Terran Ferry. And in the books, we get a huge amount of exposition from, you know, the boys as they talk to Moraine and Land and each other about how, you know, Terran Ferry is full of wackos and shitty people that don't really have any honor and stuff like that. We don't get any of that here. In fact, the guy from the ferry is actually kind of a victim, and it's pretty interesting. We get to see this, lack of setting building, but this development of the plot here that I think is pretty interesting. The dude dies because Moraine, whirlpools away his thing, and he tries to go after it. The Fade roars, which is really badass. It's kind of like Voldemort if he had like giant sharp piranha teeth, which is very cool. The Trollocs don't want to follow them because they can't swim. I didn't understand this at first, but then I was like, oh, it's because they have hooves. You can't swim. I think there's very few animals that have hooves that are able to swim because their hooves don't actually allow them to like displace water or something like that. And I think only horses are able to swim for small periods of time, and some sort of a goat is able to swim, but the vast majority of hooved animals can't because they don't have anything to paddle with, basically. So I that took me a while, but I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? So pretty interesting. And then of course the Emmonsfielders are upset that Moraine basically just killed the guy. Although, technically she didn't, and that's kind of an interesting plot point that comes up later on. Lan and Rand have this kind of stare-off where, like, Rand is like, what the hell? You're going to let this happen? And Lan is like, I don't like it, but it's what needs to happen, so we're going to let it because Moraine is more important than anyone else, which I thought was pretty interesting. They didn't really actually say that, but, that's kind of like the vibe that you get from the characters if you know them a bit, so pretty interesting. And then we get some beautiful traveling, riding their horses and panning shots that I think are really good. They really establish the kind of very beautiful setting, and they function similarly to the long passages that we get in the early books of them just running around trying to get not killed by the Trollocs. I think it works really nicely, although I do think that they take a long time to do those shots, and sometimes that makes some of the character moments kind of suffer a bit because they're like shortened. So there you go. But yeah, the panning shots are really good. They camp and Moraine heals the horses, or she like reinvigorates them with the one power. Lan is like, you need a rest, and she's like, they need their strength or whatever. And then Matt's talking about Nynaeve. He's kind of what's it called? Reminiscing about how she would, make Moraine really angry because she would always be telling her how to do things. And I think it's pretty funny because that's basically what does happen in the books. And, the boys start plotting and trying to figure out what's going on. And then Matt has a lot of funny one-liners and kind of quippy kind of things. He says something about how, the dragon is supposed to have wings and feathers and stuff like that. And he's like, the dragon's supposed to have wings, and I don't even see a feather between the four of us. So I thought it was pretty good. I like that. And I also really like that. If you look into the background and the setting that's going on, you'll notice that a lot of the rock formations are not rocks at all. They're actually like very ancient, like ruins of things, right? I think in the first episode, there was this panning shot as you get into the two rivers of these like weird pillars of rock. But if you look at them, they actually look like skyscrapers with like the glass like broken out of them. And I thought that was really badass. And then some of the scenes that we see today, or in this episode, not today, but like in the episode 2, also seem to have that, but they look different from the actual like castle ruins that we see in other shots. So it's kind of interesting that there's this like very, very ancient thing, because this is kind of playing up this whole kind of aspect of there being like this post-apocalyptic Earth that ended up being, where the Wheel of Time happens. I thought that was really, really good. Very interesting attention to detail there that most people would probably not notice, but that when you notice, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I thought that was really awesome. Then we get Moraine and Egwene chatting. You know, they have this kind of like back and forth in front of the fire where they're kind of like talking about the one power. It's not exactly the same as the books, but it is pretty similar, and I think it functions really nicely. And then Moraine has this kind of conversation with her that didn't happen in the books about the 3 oaths, about how she can't lie, she can't use the one power to do anything but defend herself or others, and she also can't make weapons that would kill each other, right? And then she has this kind of like Jedi, you know, Obi-Wan Kenobi moment where she's like, you know, from a certain point of view kind of thing, where it's like a very classic Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original trilogy where he's like, you know, Darth did kill your father, Luke, from a certain point of view, you know, where he does that whole thing where it's like, yeah, I lied to you, but not really. And Moraine kind of does this a few times throughout this this episode, and I thought it was really interesting because it's like showing, yeah, like Aes Sedai are not really good people, but they're not horrible either, and they have to do what they have to do, right? So I thought that was really interesting. And then Moraine has that whole thing where, like, you know, listening to the wind is actually using the one power, sorry, not the WAN power. And you know, they do the stone blinking thing, and it actually is really interesting because that calls back to the women's circle ceremony, the whole thing that Moraine tells Egwene to do, which is kind of similar to the void and the flame that, you know, Rand does in the books, is actually about going through the river and floating on the river and, you know, focusing on the blue water moving back and forth, which I thought was really interesting because it calls back to the women's circle thing, and it also kind of enhances and fleshes out this kind of combination here of why you know, women are basically in charge of everything, right? It makes sense, right? If the Aes Sedai are the ones with magic, therefore women are generally more powerful than men, and so they would obviously be in charge. And it's kind of interesting that there's this kind of like explanation without it being explained that makes sense, because in the books they really don't talk about it that much either. So I think that this scene sets that up really nicely and kind of combines everything into, you know, the women's circle being like the Aes Sedai of the village, even though they don't have powers, and the Aes Sedai being like the women's circle of the world, which I thought was really cool. Very, very nice. And then they have, you know, this other Egwene and Rand moment after that. And it's very interesting because it's like very hot and cold. They really can't decide if they want to be with each other or not. And, you know, with Nynaeve dead, Egwene is like, you know, maybe we can go back to being, you know, what we were, but, you know, Rand is still kind of hurt, so they don't really want to do that. And then we get this interesting little moment here where Perrin is inspecting an injury that he has that we hadn't seen before. And that comes into play a bit later, right? So, and then we have this whole scene where the boys have nightmares, which I think are actually a little bit different from the books. If I remember, in the books, the majority of the dreams were with rats, not with bats. Doesn't really make a difference. I think they chose bats because they're more easily understood as evil creatures, and so that's kind of interesting there. Not too bad there, but it leads into this little moment of infighting and this kind of moment where Rand kind of blames Moraine for the issue, and then Rand, you know, kind of acts like a young Anakin. I don't know why. Joshua and his portrayal of Rand really reminds me of like Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Anakin, where he has this very kind of like stubborn but vaguely like damaged feel to him, which I think is really, really interesting. And I think that if they wanted to do a young Skywalker, you know, Anakin Skywalker's TV show, you know, later, and Hayden Christensen didn't want to come back, they could definitely have Joshua be, you know, young Anakin Skywalker. I don't know why. Just like when he yells no at Moraine and he asks for answers, it just feels very like, yeah, this is what young Anakin would do. And I don't know why I'm making this connection in my mind, but it's very cool, very interesting that, you know, that kind of happens in my head. And, you know, Moraine's like, yeah, I don't care about you guys anymore. If you guys are going to be this difficult with me, I'm just going to dip. And she goes. And then, you know, all of the Emmons Fielders have this conversation. And Egwene wants to go with her. Rand and Egwene have this moment where, like, Rand basically tells her, you know, leave because you already did. And then Matt is like, hey, man, don't be a dick. And he has another funny one-liner here where he's like, you know, you're right, she's horrible, but she shoots fireballs, so let's stay on her good side, which I thought was pretty funny. I'm liking Matt a lot more in the TV show than in the books. Originally, Matt really comes off as the whiniest of the three, the one that really has the least amount of like what's it called, honor and like goodness to him. He seems just like a whiny kid compared to Rand and Perrin, even though Rand and Perrin are still whiny kids. They just are less than Matt. But in this one, I think Matt is a much more interesting character. With that early characterization they gave him last time, he seems a lot more interesting because he's a little bit more worldly and a little bit more damaged, and so that makes him a little bit more kind of like less whiny sounding. And with his quippy one-liners, it makes him a lot more interesting. So I actually like that a lot. I think it's a very well done thing there with Matt's characterization. And so they end up catching up with Moiraine, right? And then they have this moment where they meet the White Cloaks. Pretty shitty. The White Cloak kind of interrogates Moiraine. He's kind of feeling her up, which I thought was really odd. I don't understand if he was like taking advantage of the situation, or if he was trying to find Moraine's ring, or if he was doing both at the same time. I don't know. I thought it was really weird. Some of the choices that they make sometimes with Moraine's character kind of weird me out. Like, I don't understand what some of them are like supposed to be doing, but I don't know, it's weird. And then he touches her wound, and then that kind of saves him because it's like a Trolloc wound that she didn't heal. So obviously she's not an Aes Sedai because she would have had it healed by now. And so they let her go on her way, and we get to see that dissonance between the silver questioners and the golden fighter guys in the White Cloaks. I thought it was pretty interesting. The golden White Cloak guy that's the captain, he doesn't seem to be a shitty person. He just seems like he takes his duty seriously, whereas the questioner is a lot more like assholey than the other guys. So I think it's pretty interesting how they kind of do that. And it might mean that there's some good White Cloaks and some bad ones. Generally in the books, up to the end of the third book, I'm pretty sure most of the White Cloaks are bad. There's like one or two characters that are not, but most of them are very self-righteous assholes, so pretty interesting there. And then they dip, and then more traveling, more panning shots, more beautiful kind of things. And we get the scene where they sing the song of Manetheren, which I thought was really good. Matt sees everyone's kind of down, so he decides to sing. And then the singing kind of confuses Moiraine and Lan. They're like, oh, what the fuck? Why are they singing about Manetheren, right? Which is echoing a scene in the books that doesn't exactly happen the same way, that I think was really, really interesting. I think in the books, it happens after Matt touches the dagger, and then he starts like speaking the old tongue, and then Moraine's like, oh, what the heck, Manetheren? What the heck? Why are you talking like this, right? But in this one, they sing that little song. It's a very short sing, and the song is really short, but it's really meaningful, and it's a really good bit of world building, setting building, and development of the characters that I thought was really, really good. Matt starts, and then Egwene, and then Perrin joins, but then Rand doesn't join until the very end, which is kind of foreshadowing, kind of really interesting there. If you know what's going on, you know what's going on, and really cool. Lan just looks at them like, oh, what the hell? They know Manetheren? And I thought that was interesting. I'm curious why he didn't really say anything, and I'm curious what his, the way he was looking at it meant. Also thought it was really interesting there with the way that Moiraine tells the story, because it's basically like the Spartans versus the Persians in the Peloponnesian War, but kind of like medieval, and I thought it was really good. And during the telling of the story, Matt looks like he's remembering something, like he knows what they're talking about, that I thought was really, really good. Very, very interesting there. And then they get near Shadar Logoth, and Egwene and Rand chat again, and then Perrin touches his wound again, and then a pack of wolves show up. So we're gonna see that wolf brother thing happening, and it's different from in the books. They kind of go up to him and lick his wound, and they leave. So I'm curious to see how they're gonna make that into a thing. But I'm really excited to see how that goes. And then they're sleeping on the fire. Egwene wakes up. She kind of feels the wind telling her something, and then the Myrddraal shows up, and they have to run to Shadar Logoth because Moiraine is kind of like basically dying. They finally say Bella's name, which I think is pretty cool. Although Bella just looks like any other horse. She doesn't look different. And in fact, if I remember in the books, Bella is a brown color. Here she's a black horse. And everyone else also has black horses, except for Moiraine. She has a little white one, which is kind of, it doesn't really matter, but it would have been nice if she was a brown horse. And then, they get into Shadar Logoth, which is this huge wall. It looks really, really badass. I thought that was really cool. And then, you know, everyone's uneasy with everything. There's this, like, black color on everything. There's nothing, you know. Perrin talks about how, hey, man, there's no birds, there's no bugs, there's nothing. And then, you know, we get this exposition dump from Lan about how everything happens. And then Matt's like, holy shit, you just talked for more than you've ever talked before. And why would you think that this is a good idea to come into this place if it's so horrible, right? And then Rand explores a bit. He has another moment where Egwene, where they finally kind of basically make up. But he's kind of unsure about where this goes. Then Matt and Perrin have a heart-to-heart that they didn't have in the books. And it's all to set up Matt grabbing the ruby dagger. So it's kind of interesting. I thought it was a really good scene, actually. You know, Perrin starts to kind of cry. And then Matt and him have this kind of like, you know, it's okay. Your sisters are going to be fine. You know, Layla wanted you to have this kind of thing. Very interesting. That was really, really good. And then the big final kind of scene here is when, you know, the shadow attacks and they have to run away after Matt grabs the dagger. He wakes up in the middle of the night, goes to find the dagger, grabs it. You know, there's these whispers that happen around him, and then he grabs it. And oops, he did the bad thing, and now, you know, they have to run away. After they manage to do that, the last scene in the episode is surprise Nynaeve comes back, and she has like a what's it called, a Trolloc dagger or a Trolloc sword up to Lan's neck. I thought that was super badass. Nynaeve is one of my favorite characters in the books, and I'm really excited to see her kind of show up in the TV show again. So yeah, I do have a few questions here about the episode that I think are interesting and that I was expecting to happen already, but I just guess that there hasn't been a time for them. The first thing is, why have Rand and Lan not talked about the sword? You know, the sword is a huge aspect of Rand in the early books, and usually I think the first confrontation that Rand and Lan have about the sword happens right after Moiraine heals his dad. So why is that not happening here? What's going on? Why are they letting that kind of go for longer before they get around to talking about it? I think it'd be pretty interesting. And again, my other question was Lan's reaction to Manetheren. Is he, you know, surprised that these country bumpkins know anything about this thing? Because they usually don't really seem like they would be very knowledgeable about anything. Or is it one of those like, oh yes, I'm from Malkir, I understand the struggle of like a ruined nation, you know, Taishar or whatever he says. So I don't know. I'm curious to see what reaction it is, and if they're going to explain it later. If, you know, Lan is going to finally have a talk with the boys and Egwene, and just have like this kind of like commemorative, commissary, like, hey, I got you guys. You're from a fallen nation, so am I. You know, and Rand, that sword, I have one too. This is what it means. This is how I'm going to help you, you know, kind of become a sword master. So I'm curious to see how it's going to work, but overall, pretty excited, pretty happy with this chapter. So far, I'm actually really liking the show. I think that it's not as good as the books. Obviously, the books are better. But I think that it's doing something really good, which is making the books so much more accessible to people. Because, let's be honest, unless you're used to reading a lot of epic fantasy, and unless you like reading a lot of epic fantasy and having, like, lore dumped on you like crazy, the books are hard to read. There's a lot of information that most people would be like, why is this here? Why do I need to know this, right? Like, the whole section of Terran Ferry where, you know, they explain how they're shitty people is basically useless information, but it is meaningful to show us the characters, right? So I think it's interesting how they're balancing that, how they're kind of removing aspects of the series that maybe are not necessary fully in order to give us the things that are like the really important plot points and character development moments. And so far I'm liking it a lot, so I can't wait to check out episode 3 and see how it goes. And it does look like they're adapting 2 books, but not the 2 books that we thought. It looks like it's New Spring mixed with The Eye of the World, so hopefully that works out. And, you know, we continue to have a lot of epic Wheel of Time TV show stuff. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And, yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. See you guys later.